just a few tips when it comes to actually cutting your fabric ready to piece. I like to cut mine roughly to size, not exactly as I piece. This is my preferred method. If you prefer to have it cut exactly to size, then go for it. Again, lazy quilter, so I like to do it this way. It's easier for me. So I've cut a 2" by width of fabric strip that I will use for the background of the teacup. And we know it's big enough for those. We've already cut those earlier. And this will also be big enough to cover these sections. Like it's wide enough to cover that section and then some, because you need to cover your section plus the seam allowance. And this will be plenty wide enough to cover that for the rest of my teacup. So that's the background fabric, super easy. Now the actual fussy cut, which obviously is the hero of the whole shebang, I'm using this print. It's from my collection Bloom for Riley Blake Designs, and it's out in stores at the moment. I'm going to use this little ladybug here with the leaf around it. It just fits on my teacup perfectly. So when we go to cut our fabric, now, oh sorry, I should mention, when we lay the template here, we need to put it on the back side of the fabric, because this is actually going to be the front of your block. This, where the template is the side that we're going to be sewing on. So particularly if you want it facing a certain way, if it's a directional print, just remember to make sure you do that. So now this one, if I put it like this, the edge of the fabric is actually sitting in my seam allowance. So it's a fraction too small. So if I change it to this way though, I can line the bottom up just with the edge there and it'll fit perfectly. And I've still got a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all sides. Make sure you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all sides of your fussy cut and for any of the pieces that you use when you're foundation piecing, because otherwise it's too small and you're going to end up with a gap in your block and it's a pain in the butt to come back and fix. So this way, just make sure you have a full 1/4 inch or even more on all sides. So again, I like to keep my fabric kind of neat. I don't like to cut it like Swiss cheese, personal preference. So I would actually cut this strip. You can see I've actually already cut some there. So I'm just going to continue it down and just cut it, oops, a neat line like that. And then I've got it ready to go. And what I might do at this point, again, line up my template or however you want to do it. And then I'm just going to rough cut that to size to fit. And with that, these sections I'm going to use for the handle on my teacup. So they don't go to waste. I'm going to take them with me to use for this section. This section's ready to go for piecing. And then I've got my background fabric. So there's my collection of bits and pieces. The next step that I like to do before I start piecing is to rough cut my fabrics ready to size. So we've rotary cut it into strips and sections so it's nice and tidy off our fabric. Those bits, remember, they're our top and bottom sections. They're going to sit to the side. These bits, I'm going to show you how I rough cut ready to sew. Now that's my center. That's going to be my actual teacup when we put it on like that. It'll go. But I need to cut background sections for here and here. So you can cut these quite precisely. I prefer to rough cut mine ready to go. The biggest thing is always cut them bigger than you think they're going to need. Always. Because if it's too small in your seam allowance, you're not going to have enough space. You're going to have a gap in your finished block, or you're going to have an uneven edge. Always cut enough. It needs to cover that section there and then a full 1/4 inch on all sides. But cut more than you need to. Like, trust me on that one. So much better to use up a bit more fabric at this stage than to try to come back and repair it later. Okay, so that's piece A1 that will be going in the center there. So I put that face down because I like to put my pieces in order. And then when I go to the sewing machine, they are ready to sew as I go. So piece A2 is this little triangle here. What I do is take my background fabric and lay it across so that I can see if it's going to fit, and then I rough cut it with scissors just like this. So you can see that piece is quite big for that little section there. When we come to piece, it's going to need to cover it and a full 1/4 inch. I've probably got more like 3/4 of an inch, so no worries there. So that's piece A2. Then A3 is a little bit longer. So what I do is I lay my fabric down against there. Now it needs to be 1/4 inch up the top and 1/4 inch down here as well. So I cut it plenty big. I would much rather err on the side of caution than have to come back and fix it later. Okay, so there's my A5. Oh, sorry, I missed A4. So that one's going on an angle, just a slight angle, but you need to make sure it's going to be enough out here. So just put it up a little bit further up the top. Again, bigger is always better, especially when you're talking about angles in foundation piecing. So that is my A section with all the pieces ready to go. And I put that together to take to the sewing machine. And then I will do the same here. And again, I'm just using that background strip that we cut earlier. And you just rough cut it to size. Super easy. So that will be B2 to go across. If I want B3, that's a little bit longer. Sorry, B4. I use the tiny scraps, even like these little bits. And then I just need B5 and B6. B5, see? B6. Again, you can cut it precisely. I just like to rough cut it. Now, another thing I like to do to save a little bit of time, fold my fabric in half like that, because these bits are the exact same. So if I just double it up, I've got enough for B6 and B7. And then down here, I do the same. That'll cover those ones there. Then we just have a longer section on the side and the top and the bottom. So super easy. If you rough cut it like this, you'll have fabric to work with. You don't have to take a whole heap of fabric over and have it next to your sewing machine. You've got little piles. There's my pile for A, there's my pile for B, C, and D. So that's it. That's the cutting. That's your fabric ready to go. We are up to the sewing stage. So I will see you back tomorrow where I'll share my hints and tips on foundation piecing and we'll make some tiny teacups. See you then.